Imagine this for a moment. You wake up tomorrow, and your refrigerator is gone. No cold air, no freezer, no ice. The meat you bought yesterday? Spoiled. The milk? Sour. The leftovers? Dangerous. Now imagine this is not for one day, but for your entire life. For most of human history, refrigerators did not exist. Yet people still ate. They survived. They built civilizations. So how did food survive without cold? Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Here, we uncover the forgotten history behind everyday things. And if you want to improve your English by listening to real, meaningful stories, this channel is for you. Now let's go back. Far before electricity, before kitchens, before grocery stores, food was the most dangerous thing in the world. It could keep you alive, or it could kill you. In the ancient world, food spoiled fast. Heat was everywhere. Bacteria was invisible, and hunger was constant. When an animal was hunted, its meat began to rot within hours. Fruit fermented quickly under the sun. Grain attracted insects and mold. People didn't waste food because they were careful. They avoided waste because waste meant death. A single mistake could poison a family. A bad winter could wipe out a village. This fear shaped human behavior. Early humans learned quickly. You don't eat everything at once, but you also can't save it easily. So they watched nature. They noticed something important. Food dried by the sun lasted longer. Food touched by smoke changed. Food buried underground stayed cooler. Food covered in salt behaved differently. These weren't inventions, they were observations. Trial, error, survival. A piece of meat left in the open became deadly. The same meat, dried in the sun, could last weeks. Fish rubbed with salt stopped rotting. Milk left alone spoiled, but when fermented, it became yogurt or cheese. None of this was science. It was desperation. Every culture learned its own lessons. Some learned through famine, others through migration, others through war. Food preservation wasn't about comfort, it was about time. Time between hunts, time between harvests, time between life and death. Without refrigerators, humans had to slow decay, not stop it. And every method came with risk. Too much moisture? Mold. Too much heat? Rot. Too little salt? Poison. But slowly, painfully, knowledge passed down. Parents taught children. Tribes taught generations. Civilizations built systems. By learning how to fight time itself. In the next part, we'll explore how nature became humanity's first refrigerator, using the sun, the wind, smoke, and salt. Because before cold saved food, humans learned to outsmart decay. And that changed everything. When humans realized food could not be stopped from spoiling, they asked a different question. What if decay could be slowed? Without machines, without electricity, without understanding bacteria, humans turned to the oldest teacher they had, nature. The sun was the first tool. People noticed something simple. Meat left in the open rotted quickly, but meat cut into thin strips and left under the hot sun became hard, dry, and lighter. It smelled different, it tasted different, but it didn't kill you. Drying removed water, and without water, decay slowed down. This was the birth of dried meat and dried fruit. Simple, effective, and still used today. Then came wind. In dry, windy regions, people hung food high above the ground. Air moved constantly, moisture disappeared. In some cultures, fish were hung on wooden frames near the sea. In others, meat was stretched across poles in open plains. The wind became invisible protection. But drying alone was not enough everywhere. So humans discovered smoke. At first, smoke was accidental. Food hung near fire tasted strange, but it lasted longer. Smoke did something powerful. It dried the surface of food and filled it with chemicals that insects and bacteria hated. Soon, people built fires not just for warmth, but for preservation. Meat was hung above slow-burning wood. Fish was placed in smoky huts. Flavor was born by accident. Smoked food didn't just survive longer, it traveled better. And that changed everything. Then came salt. Salt was rare, precious, sometimes more valuable than gold. But when people rubbed salt onto meat or fish, something incredible happened. Water was pulled out. Bacteria struggled to live. Decay slowed dramatically. Salted food could last months, sometimes years. This allowed armies to march, ships to sail, cities to grow. Entire trade routes existed just for salt. Where salt was controlled, power followed. Another quiet miracle came from the ground. People noticed that food buried underground stayed cooler. Pits, caves, and cellars became natural storage spaces. In winter, snow and ice were packed into deep holes, covered with straw and dirt. Cold was trapped, sometimes until summer. These were the first ice houses. And then there was fermentation. What looked like spoilage was actually transformation. Milk became yogurt and cheese. Vegetables became pickles. Grain became beer. Fermentation didn't fight bacteria, it replaced dangerous bacteria with helpful ones. Food changed form, but stayed safe. This was not luck. It was survival knowledge passed quietly through generations. Every culture developed its own methods, based on climate, based on fear, based on experience. Before refrigerators, humans didn't defeat time, they learned to slow it. Once humans learned how to slow decay, food stopped being just something to eat. It became something to control. And control changes everything. In ancient Egypt, food preservation meant survival after the harvest. The Nile flooded once a year. When the water returned to its banks, fields exploded with grain. But the grain had to last. So Egyptians built massive storage rooms, thick walls, dry air, careful systems. Grain was sealed, guarded, and counted. It fed workers. It fed armies. It fed pyramids into existence. Food was no longer personal. It was political. In Mesopotamia, salt and dried fish fueled cities. In China, fermentation became an art. Soy sauce, pickled vegetables, and preserved pastes allowed food to survive long winters and long journeys. In ancient Rome, preservation powered an empire. Roman soldiers did not march on fresh meat. They marched on dried grain, salted pork, and hard bread. Ships crossed seas carrying barrels of preserved food. Markets depended on food that could travel. Without preservation, Rome could not feed its cities. Without food, Rome could not rule. But preservation didn't only build power, it built inequality. Those with storage survived famines. Those without didn't. Food became currency. Salt paid soldiers. Grain bought loyalty. Entire wars were decided not by swords, but who could feed their people longer. In colder regions, humans learned different lessons. In Northern Europe, root cellars were dug deep into the earth. Potatoes, turnips, and apples slept underground, safe from frost. In the Arctic, people used ice itself. Frozen meat stayed edible for months. Cold became a weapon against decay. In deserts, sun and dryness were allies. In jungles, fermentation was safer than storage. Every climate shaped its own survival system. But there was a limit to all of this. Preserved food tasted different. Textures changed. Nutrition suffered. Fresh food was rare, luxury. For most people, food was hard, salty, smoky, or sour. But still, it worked. Preservation allowed cities to grow beyond farms. It allowed trade between continents. It allowed humans to think about tomorrow. Until one day, humans stopped asking how to slow decay and started asking how to stop it. Ice houses grew larger. Natural cold was trapped and transported. Winter was saved for summer. In the 1800s, wealthy homes used blocks of ice cut from frozen lakes, stored underground, wrapped in sawdust. Food stayed cold. For the first time, decay was no longer inevitable. This was the beginning of a quiet revolution. In the final part, we'll see how cold left nature, entered machines, and forever changed what it means to eat, live, and survive.
For thousands of years, humans fought decay. They dried food, smoked it, salted it, buried it underground. But decay was never defeated, only delayed. Then, something extraordinary happened. Humans learned how to trap cold. At first, cold still belonged to nature. In winter, massive blocks of ice were cut from frozen lakes, dragged by hand, stored underground, packed in straw and sawdust. These ice houses were dark, deep, and carefully guarded. In rich homes and growing cities, food stayed cold even in summer. Milk lasted longer, meat stayed safer, freshness became possible. But ice was fragile, expensive, limited. Only the wealthy could afford it. The real revolution came when cold left nature and entered machines. In the 19th century, scientists and inventors began experimenting with artificial cooling, compressing gases, releasing pressure, pulling heat out of the air. What they were building wasn't just a machine, it was a new relationship with time. By the early 1900s, mechanical refrigeration entered factories, ships, and markets. Food could now travel farther without spoiling. Cities no longer needed to live next to farms. Then, quietly, refrigerators entered homes. Not as luxury, but as necessity. Suddenly, families could store food for days, then weeks. Leftovers became normal. Fresh meat became common. Milk stopped being a daily risk. The kitchen changed. Shopping changed. Life changed. Refrigeration didn't just preserve food, it preserved health. Food poisoning dropped, disease slowed, infant survival increased. People stopped planning life around decay. For the first time in history, humans controlled freshness. And with that control came abundance. But it's easy to forget how new this is. Refrigerators are less than a century old in most homes. Your grandparents lived through this change. Their grandparents lived without it. Every time you open your fridge, you are touching thousands of years of struggle, observation, and survival. Sun, smoke, salt, ice, all leading to one quiet invention that reshaped the world. So the next time you store leftovers, or pour cold milk, or reach for fresh food days after buying it, remember this. Before refrigerators, food didn't survive easily. Humans did because they learned how to outsmart time. If you enjoyed this journey through forgotten history, like the video, share it with someone who loves learning, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories about the hidden past of everyday life. Because the smallest inventions often change humanity the most.